Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by onlinegreatbooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. I'm Scott Hambrick.
And I'm Karl Schut.
Today, on this Online Great Books podcast, we're going to talk about The Storm of Steel, Ernst Jünger's 1920 book. We're reading the 1929 translation by Basil Creighton from Mystery Grove Publishing Company. But before we get into this book, which is a hell of a book, I want you guys to go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and join our mailing list because we're getting ready to do some neat things. One of those neat things is opening up enrollment, which we only do about 6 times a year. And then another one of those neat things is we're going to open up some, I think we're going to call them gateway sessions, Karl. Like the plague's not with us like it was. We had those plague sessions. I think we're going to call them gateway sessions. We're going to do some free seminars over some good books. Not the great books, but some pretty good books.
The first hit is free.
That's right. Like the Pusher Man. That's right. Yeah, we want people to learn how to do seminar, how to read closely, knowing that you're going to talk about something later with smart people, and then do seminar. And we want you to get hooked. I'm not ashamed of that.
But it's a good drug.
That's true.
It's awakening your reason. Yeah. Actually, it's the non-drug, right? It'd be for 2 hours, you won't have the drug of Netflix and your cell phone and everything else. You'll be talking to smart people. You'll be awake for 2 hours.
Fully you for a minute or two. Yeah, so you could go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and sign up for a little mailing list there. I am never going to give your address to anybody else. We'll make sure it's worth it to you. You're going to trust us with your mailing address, and we'll make sure that we give you way more than that was worth to you, and we'll protect your privacy and all that. So go do that, and that helps support our show. Because this is not the United Way. This is not a volunteer organization, Karl.
Nope.
Are we altruists?
Are we altruists?
I am not.
No.
Gross.
I mean, it's good for you. It's good for us.
Yeah.
This is a mutual benefit society.
I like that. Good things are just good. The Storm of Steel. Oh, gosh. What a book. It's about World War I.
That's the war nobody knows anything about.
Or any longer. Got overshadowed by that flashy mechanical war. We've kind of forgotten about the World War I. This book is not, clearly the title isn't the same. This is not the same kind of book that All's Quiet on the Western Front is. This is a different kind of book, although it is an autobiographical account of a frontline soldier. All's Quiet on the Western Front is a fictional account, but seems pretty accurate, but the attitudes expressed in these two books are very, very different. Aren't they?
Yeah, so we'd been reading a bunch of stuff that probably plays into our sympathies. This is not necessarily anti-war. I don't know that it's pro-war,
right? But
it's not anti. He served with distinction in the German army. The German army were, I guess, the bad guys in World War I. I guess. Who knows? He served with distinction. He got the Iron Cross. He got the medal, I can't read French ones, but for merit, the Grand Merit Cross. He was wounded 6 times in trench warfare, kept going back. He wrote this in 1920. He was born in 1895. So this is a 25-year-old man who's just been through the Storm of Steel 2 years previously. Kept a diary the whole time, and he's writing it down. And, that for me, that's like, I have a bunch of books, because my grandfather did a lot of study of that war between the states, the Civil War. And the coolest books are the letters.
Yeah.
Soldiers from both sides are sending home, because you get to touch those people. You get to know what it was like, rather than a historian sitting in a safe office somewhere on a campus. Well, actually, the war, whatever. This guy was there. He was in it. And so it's a profound, I don't know, it's a neat book for just that reason.
Mm-hmm.
to learn what this thing was like. Well, what's trench warfare? What happened in this World War I in the northwest part of Europe?
Well, that's where modernity came of age. We had the ability to kill lots and lots of people very, very quickly. I mean, everybody knows this, don't they?
Well, I don't know if they know that because we generally don't know much history. So let's recap. There were probably one war with an interruption, two huge wars in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Trying to figure out the cause of World War I. It's Archduke Ferdinand getting shot by Gavrilo Princip. That's a Trivial Pursuit question. So Austria declares war on Serbia, but they didn't get around to attacking Serbia for 2 years. And then everybody preemptively decided to attack each other. And
it's so weird.
It is so weird. And it was actually a world war. And one of the strangest things to me is somewhere in the middle of this book. I really don't. I'm not going to be able to find the quotes that well, but Jünger's, they're attacking this bunch of people that they think are English. And they're shouting out, the English that they know. And the enemy doesn't understand them and shouts something back at them, and they can't understand it. And they take a bunch of prisoners, and they find out they were Indian. Mm-hmm. Indians, okay? So this is the muddy northwest part, the flat part of northwest Europe, slogging through the mud, facing German machine guns. You have a bunch of Indians who are, how many thousands of miles away is that?
Not enough thousands for them,
Dying for the British Empire in a quagmire far from home. We might be used to that now, but those poor guys, snatched up. Let's go fight for the British Empire. Now go face the Germans.
Yeah, a bunch of technological innovations had made this war particularly brutal. 1, smokeless powder. 2, this is my list.
Okay.
New metallurgy. You can make machine guns and all kinds of things that you couldn't make before. High-pressure cartridges that would not burst the new barrels made out of better metal than they would been made out of even 20 years before. TNT, you can read about Alfred Nobel and his company that got rich off of this war. Gases and other poisons.
Chlorine gas and mustard gas.
Phosgene gas. So you've got high explosives, much improved artillery, machine guns with very, very high rates of fire, and this gas, these different poisons, this chemical warfare, meant that the tactics of yesteryear, where you just squared off against each other and took a knee and fired off a single shot and then had to either load it, breech loader or a muzzle loader, those days were over, and people got mired down because the only safe thing they could do in the face of the enemy to stop the advance of the enemy was to dig a hole in front of them and hunker down. And they did that for 3, 4, almost 5 years in some places. And Jünger is right there in the middle of it. Oh, the other technological advance, Karl, that I think, let me editorialize, that helped cause this war or prolong this war or make it particularly brutish was fiat currency. If you ran out of gold, you couldn't buy armament in the past. But if you ran out of gold and you're in an economy that uses fiat currency, you can print some more money and make a claim on future production of your country to buy more guns and bullets and weapons of destruction. And I don't think that this war would have been possible if everyone had stuck on a gold standard. No one could have afforded the thing.
You didn't have good tanks yet.
Yep.
Which could have bridged the trenches and not really cared about them. So it was a years-long battle of attrition over the same ground. I have the casualty figures up for the Battle of the Somme. So of the British Commonwealth, that's UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. What the heck are they doing there? Yeah. South Africa, Newfoundland, 419,654. 200,000 French died in this battle.
Yeah, this is not the war.
So the total allied, 624,000. And then Germany was it was like 500,000. So it's like 1.2 million people died.
One battle.
This is not Verdun, which is worse.
Yeah.
If you wonder why Europe goes from the heights of culture. Europe in 1913, there's some great things going on there. The music is fantastic. The art is wonderful. 1918, for the rest of the century, it's defeated. At least in a lot of ways, it's defeated.
Destroyed itself.
They killed everybody.
Mm-hmm.
They killed everybody. Tolkien makes a comment. We'll get to the book in a sec, but Tolkien makes a comment that by 1918, all of his friends were dead. This is the war. This is one of the things that, if you're interested in history and you don't know anything about World War I think you ought to look at it. It's a change. It's the modern world. It's hard to take when you read about it.
Have you been to the National World War I Museum in Kansas City, Missouri?
I have not. I did not know there was a National World War I Museum in Kansas City, Missouri.
Most people don't, but there it is. And it's darn good. It's not real big. It's not like that National World War II Museum in New Orleans. It's not as big as that, but it's good. I don't know that anybody can get a flavor of what this thing was actually like, but if you're passing through Kansas City, that's a good one to go see. Heck, I think it's free. It's a national park. It's very good. Have you ever seen the video game Battlefield 1, Karl?
No.
It's a first-person shooter. World War I is the theme. And it's a video game. Nobody gets muddy or smells rotten, corpses or anything when you play it. But when you play that game, you get an idea of just how awful it was. You can't get around on the battlefields in there. The debris and everything is such a mess. The debris is terrible. And you just can't stay alive very long in the game. When you play it, you're just going to get killed all the time. And of course, it's a game, so you get regenerated and you start over again from where you stopped off. But it's not like Pac-Man where you just like clear a level and don't get eaten. Like, you're going to get killed in that game over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. I don't know how realistic it is, but it was just deadly. And he talks in this book over and over again about get some new guy, and that night the guy would get killed.
Oh, you dig your trench. You'd have your little spot in your trench, and the dead would come out of the walls from last year's battle. Yeah. The dead that had just been shoved into the mud or sunk into the mud. Can you imagine?
No.
You're sitting there having your coffee in between battles, and there's last year's corpse coming out of the wall. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's a horrible world and a horrible life that he lives. But Jünger is, I think, an amazing soul. He sees good in it, and I think that he loves everybody around him, including the people that are trying to kill him and who he is trying to kill. Here on page 11, there's just a little chunk here. Here's just one paragraph that paints a picture of how nasty this all was. He says, "We were in the battle-tossed empire of the infantry. In a circle all around the breakthrough, the artillery fire made a clean sweep of the trees. On the tortured ground lay the dead and dying that the attack had cost us, their faces toward the enemy and their gray coats scarcely visible against the ground. A gigantic fellow whose red beard was smeared with blood stared into the sky, his fingers clutching the loose soil. Another, younger, lying in a shell hole, stirred and turned over. The shallowness of death was already on his face. He did not seem to like our looking at him. With a listless movement, he drew his cloak over his head and lay still." Just vignette after vignette like that of what this guy lived in. I think he was in it for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans were not in it a full year, I don't think. But this guy was in it all. But in spite of how nasty it all is, on the page before that, he talks about the fun of the sort of brotherhood of war that he experienced. He says, "The warm weather and the magnificent country worked on us like magic, and we went for long walks whenever we had time off. We were in such high spirits that at night we had to indulge in ragging before we could settle down to sleep. A favorite game among others was pouring water or coffee into the open mouths of the snorers." They were young men being young men and, screwing with each other and practical jokes, and he enjoyed the brotherhood of the thing as well. Even though it was nasty, he found good things in it.
Yeah, in the end of the introduction, there's an introduction that he wrote in 29, and he says nice things about the English. He says, there's no one less likely to disparage the lion than the lion hunter. The English that he was fighting are, they're just like him. But at the bottom of Roman numeral 2 in the introduction, "Time only strengthens my conviction that it was a good and strenuous life, and that the war, for all its destructiveness, was an incomparable schooling of the heart." The frontline soldier whose foot came down on the earth so grimly and harshly may claim that this at least that it came down cleanly. Warlike achievements are enhanced by the inherent worth of the enemy. So, I mean, this gives you a sense of Junger's take on it. He is stuck in the horrors of war, and he does not shy away from writing about them. And this book broke my heart like 100 times.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, this is the paradox. If war is so awful, you know, like Smedley Butler, if war is a racket and war is so awful, why do we keep doing it? Whenever the propaganda says there's a new war starting, why? There's always a whole bunch of people ready to sign up.
He was forged in the storm of steel, and he was thankful for that, I think.
Yeah. For me, this is like the book Achilles would have written. Or maybe Diomedes would have written. Mm-hmm. Achilles is a little self-centered, but Diomedes, who was a joyful soldier in the Iliad, he might have written a book like this, if he made it out.
He saw good in it. It's not a pro-war book, though. It's complex. He's page 15, he says, danger is the supreme moment of his career. He's talking about a junior officer, the junior officer. Danger is the supreme moment of his career, his chance to show his manhood at its best. Honor and gallantry make him the master of the hour. What is more sublime than to face death at the head of 100 men? Such a one will never find obedience fail him, for courage runs through the ranks like wine.
Yeah, well, is there anything to that? Is it? I have never done that. I hope never to do that. There's the enemy. They're probably going to kill you. Go try to kill them.
I think all these words mean something in this. I think he picked them. Of course, we're reading a translation here. Honor and gallantry make him the master of the hour. You know, he talks about his duty, and he is honor bound as the leader of men to lead them, to do it. So his sense of honor makes him do his job. And then the gallantry is the thing that actually enables him to do it in the face of the gunfire and so on. Those two things make him the master of the hour. And he thinks it's sublime then to face death at the head of 100 men. I think that's an honor for him to be in the position to lead those 100 men. And frankly, you'll read here that he wants to do it effectively and safely as can be. And he states over and over again his respect for the enemy too. He's in a situation that he doesn't like. And again, it's not a pro-war book, but he's in it and he's resigned to the fact that he's in it. And now he must do the thing that is in front of him to do, and he must do it well. I have a great deal of respect for that. We've read all these anti-war books, and I'm certainly anti-war and maybe more so every day. But I think it's easier to write an anti-war screed than it is something like this.
Yeah.
A thoughtful depiction of both the good and the bad. It's easy to discount every single thing about it as evil and bad, but he sees it as part of the human experience, just like death would be. And as such, there are redeeming moments and there are things that can be redeeming that occur inside it. Am I too pro-Jünger here?
No, it's a book I think a lot of people ought to read that haven't ever read anything like this. He's in a very, what to us is an impossible situation, and he does it anyway, you know? He does what his nation demands of him. He does his duty. And there was a time later in the book when he doesn't talk this way, but I didn't really want to go back, but it was my duty, and that brought me back. The fact that these men were looking up to him made him have the courage to do what he needed to do. Page 27, there was a phrase that I marked. So what they would do, they would have to move in a place and dig more trenches. Anyway, so I took an entrenching party from the Altenburg Redoubt to C sector. One of them, Landsturmsman Diener, climbed up to the edge of the side of the trench to shovel earth over the top. He was scarce up when a shot fired from the sap got him in the skull and laid him dead on the floor of the trench. He was married and had 4 children. I'm going to pause right there. So that's like straight out of the Iliad, where you get the death, and Homer tells you who the person was. These are not extras in a movie. He had an inn by the side of the road or whatever. So this young man, Landstromsman Diener, who probably everyone else has forgotten, was married and had 4 children. His comrades lay in wait a long while behind the parapet to take vengeance. They sobbed with rage. It is remarkable how little they grasp the war as an objective thing. They seem to regard the Englishman who fired the fatal shot as a personal enemy. I can understand it. They don't get it, though. The war is an objective thing. It's not personal. Mm-hmm. It's hypostasized. It's a thing. The war is a thing.
On page 29, he furthers that idea when he says, "It has always been my ideal in war to eliminate all feelings of hatred and to treat my enemy as an enemy only in battle and to honor him as a man according to his courage. And it is exactly in this that I have found many kindred souls among British officers. It depends, of course, on not letting oneself be blinded by an excessive national feeling, as the case generally is between the French and the Germans. The consciousness of the importance of one's own nation ought to reside as a matter of course and unobtrusively in everyone, just as unconditional sense of honor does in a gentleman. Without this, it is impossible to give others their due."
Interesting thought there.
You can't respect the Frenchman who's attacking you until you understand that he cares about his nation just as you do yours. Is that what he's saying?
I think so. If you don't love your own country, you can't understand why anyone else would love his. If you're not a patriot in some sense, all patriotism is going to seem insane to you. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that makes sense. He said in the previous page something, there are things that I wish he would follow up on, and maybe he does in other books. He lived a long life, 103 years. Despite being wounded 6 times in World War I, he lives 103 years. See, if he were a Dungeons & Dragons character, his constitution is like 20. It's Rasputin. You know?
Yeah.
But in the second paragraph on 28, he just mentions this thing. He's upset at some of the things that are happening to the towns where they're getting billeted. "Much as I am the disciple of the logical gospel of force, I was disgusted by the painful exaggerations of it I witnessed in those days, such as the compulsion upon all inhabitants, women included, to salute officers." So he doesn't like the way that they are, some of the things that they're doing in these French villages where they would live. But that phrase, the logical gospel of force, I wish he would explain it. What does he mean by that? Is this just the violence solves problems thing? You know, once the impersonal war starts, there are things that have to be done. He's living in people's houses.
Yeah.
And using their stuff. Because that's what armies do.
He's living in French farmhouses with the families of the nation he is a member of the invading army of. It's insane.
Yeah. So much insight in here. I mean, I wish he had written like a treatise on war. There's another spot where he's chatting with some older guy, and he mentions that the conversation turned to the cause of war, but he doesn't say what they said.
Right.
Like, Ernst, what did you say? You were there. You probably have interesting thoughts. I wish you would tell me.
You could be a junior officer like he was and have no idea what the causes were. I would like to hear what he had to write or say about it, but, you know, what does a guy that's in the trench in front of, you know, Company A know about the causes of war? I don't know.
And if he doesn't know the causes, does that follow that he should go home?
Ooh.
See, that would be a very modern attitude.
Right.
You know, why am I here in Vietnam? You know, what's the point of this? And if you can't figure out the point, then you should have dodged or not gone. I think Jünger would not have said that. You know, you're a member of a nation. It's part of your duty to go do what the nation determines to do. That's why I think this is a really important book. It's not a fun book, but it's a really important book to read because it's going to give you a view that you probably don't have. Mm-hmm. It won't make you think it, but it'll make you know about it. We don't just read things we agree with. You don't just read endless cases of confirmation bias. This is not confirmation bias. This is a guy who went to war and did well and knows all the horrors, and in the last paragraph still says he thinks that it did good for the people that went.
Yep.
You probably ought to hear that opinion. Doesn't mean you have to agree with him, but maybe you will. I don't know. That's what books do. They challenge you. But there's a lot of bits of wisdom in here. 33, it is not danger, however extreme it may be, that depresses the spirit of the men, so much as over-fatigue and wretched conditions. And then this line, people who have leisure can afford themselves every luxury, even that of heroic feelings.
Yeah. He knows something about humans that I don't know, you know? Can't know. Mm-hmm. He's seen them under those terrible under the worst circumstances possible.
They'll be sitting in a cellar drinking coffee, and the bomb will land, on top of the house, and they'll just keep drinking their coffee.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? So you'll learn something about the resilience of the human spirit, okay? Or the strength of the human spirit that you won't know necessarily with the typical modern American's experience. You don't know what hard stuff you could do if you had to, because we've generally been prosperous. Everybody's got a cell phone, everybody's got internet. Not everybody, I'm rounding. But everybody's got pretty much food to eat. Obesity is our most common health problem. That's pretty good. That means you've got a lot of food, if that's your most common health problem, and if it's not starvation. We don't know what we can do in hard situations. And you read books like this, and you find out, there's people going over the top of the trench towards that machine gun, armed with a revolver and some grenades. The translation calls them bombs.
Bombs, I know.
Is what they are, You could do it. I hope you never have to, but you could. Yes. Or at least millions did.
Some people have it in them. Over and over again, he talks about, he had an extensive war diary, dated, time-stamped. He kept meticulous records. So in 1920, when he sat down and the smoke had barely cleared and wrote this, he referred to those notes very carefully. The recollections were at least somewhat fresh in his mind. And there's a lot in here about how he would particularly, execute his job. To this point about how, Karl, you say, you could do it. I wrote here in the margin here on page 39, right at the top paragraph, I wrote, he has an instinct that I do not have. He says, suddenly the Fenric clutched my arm on the right, quite close, gently. Directly after, I heard sundry rustlings in the grass 10 meters to our right. With one of those lightning intuitions that come to one on such occasions, I saw the whole situation. We'd been crawling the whole time along the English wire. They had heard us and now had come out of the trench to examine the ground in front of them. So in the paragraphs up into that, you realize that they're crawling on their bellies in no man's land in the dark. And they can't lift their heads for fear of getting shot in the head. And they're crawling on their belly in the dark, and they have no idea where they are. They get all turned around on a moonless night, crawling on their belly in the mud in no man's land. And he hears a rustling in the grass 10 meters to his right and can comprehend the entire situation in an instant like that. He says, such moments on the prowl by night are unforgettable. Eyes and ears are stretched to their utmost. The sound of the enemy's feet coming nearer through the tall grass assumes the remarkable and portentous distinctness that takes almost the entire possession of one. And then he starts giving orders, and he gets most of his men back safely from being lost in only 10 meters from the enemy line. A lot of people can go over the top. I don't know that I could. I'd probably sob in the bottom of the trench, get my ass kicked, or maybe shot by one of my NCOs for not going over the top. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that I don't have the ability to apprehend what's going on in a situation like that and then issue orders that are coherent and correct enough to get most of my men back to safety in an instant like that. This guy has a special thing.
Well, that good officers have.
Yeah, the good officers and good NCOs have.
And all of this, I have never experienced any of this. All of my knowledge of war is from reading and movies. I'm thinking of Band of Brothers, the couple of the dramatic action in that series and in the book. I read the book, and it's mostly true. I guess Ambrose got a couple of things wrong. But, the first officer they had taken through training would go out and get lost. Or they had one, I guess, at the Battle of the Bulge that wouldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't make any decisions. And these men would do anything if the guy would just make a decision. I think Jünger was one of those. He was apparently, a bunch of medals, 6-time wounded, that knew what to do in the situation and would actually be able to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you never know if that's you, unless you get in that situation. There's chlorine gas. There's gas clouds hanging in heavy white swaths over Monkey and rolling towards point 124 in the low ground. They fought this war with gas clouds. There's mustard gas and there's chlorine gas, and they probably had some other kind. On 45, I'm not sure what a fanric is, but a fanric sorrowfully showed me his new sword knot whose brilliance had been turned to a blackish green. The chlorine comes through and it reacts with your metal. And like your bronze, I think, and would make it green. And get it in your lungs, like it can be sharp just sitting by a pool that has a little bit too much chlorine. I was thinking I'm gonna think about a modern movie, which I'm sure you didn't see. All right, so there was this DC superhero movie, Wonder Woman, which is set in World War I. And it's a decent movie, and she's awfully pretty. But there's some things in there that might give you an entree into this book. One, I suppose, correct, and one completely wrong. When the superhero, and she can do it because she's a superhero, crosses no man's land. So sit there if you're watching that movie and imagine, wait, we don't have superheroes with magic shields. How do you get across there?
Force of will.
Yeah. You don't have a Wonder Woman to take the lead and distract everybody. It's just you. It's just you. But one of the things they got wrong in that movie, it was all about how the evil German Ludendorff was going to use poison gas. They both used poison gas.
Yeah, the British are the ones that gassed them and tarnished the sword just now.
Yeah. Winners write histories, and the winning history is written by the Allies. Yeah, well, the English were the ones gassing them. They left there's a later scene. They left canisters of gas with electric charges that Jünger has to go through later on in the book. So everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing these inhumanities to man in this war. There were 1.2 million killed at the Battle of the Somme, about equal casualties on both sides. This is why you need to read the books. The movies get everything wrong.
Yep.
Okay? You have to go read the books. Go read the original sources if you can get them. This is a primary source for what that war was like. What you learned in high school is diluted. If they even mentioned this war, it's diluted, sanitized, made to probably tell one story.
Diluted, not diluted.
Diluted and diluted.
Oh.
I think I intentionally made that malapropism.
Those are big words.
So diluted is when you put water in your wine. You dilute the wine. Diluted is when you are misled. So diluted would be you've watered it down and told a lie. I just invented that word.
I like it.
Diluted.
This thing reads a lot like the Iliad. I like how you said that this might be the book that Diomedes would have written. On 43, when the firing had ceased, we had one more loss. Fusilier Nyenhuser suddenly fell from the fire step and rolled, bumping down the dugout steps into the middle of a group of his fellows assembled at the bottom. We examined and we found a small wound on the forehead and a puncture over the right nipple, which blood was flowing. It was impossible to say whether the wounds or the fall had killed him.
Now, you don't even know the guy who shot you.
Nope.
Just coming out of nowhere. They still find bullets in those fields.
Yep.
So much munitions were expended. My kid, my two boys are history nuts. My youngest was telling me, did you know that when the English were going to go home, they just started firing all their munitions off because they didn't want to have to cart them back?
I did not know that.
I believe it.
I do too.
So much ammunition. Storm of steel. You're out plowing your field now, you're going to dig up World War I bullets, sometimes unexploded shells, buried in the mud. It's a hard book.
He wrote a book on the metaphysics of pain, Karl. Very interesting. I want to read that one.
Metaphysics of pain.
Yeah. On page 45, he talks about what fear was like during a bombardment. He says, it is as if one were tied tight to a post and threatened by a fellow swinging a sledgehammer. Now the hammer is swung back for the blow. Now it whirls forward till just missing your skull. It sends splinters flying from the post once more. That is exactly what it feels like to be exposed to heavy shelling without cover. And when I read that, the first time, when I read it just then, I didn't really have the same reaction. But I was just on the edge of my seat reading about this guy swinging this sledgehammer, and I'm like tied to a post, What a nightmare. He says, Fortunately for me personally, I always have the confidence at the back of my head that things will soon be better. One has the same feeling too at games, and though it may have no justification, it has at least the merit of relieving the nerves. And so, this bombardment as well came to an end, and I was able to set out again, this time at top speed. The guy has an inner reserve. And he talks about the courage of ignorance, the courage that comes with ignorance. But by page 45, this guy's been deep in the war for a long time. The ignorance is gone, and he's able to endure that fear and still act over and over again. It's amazing.
Yeah. Page 50, when he had a little bit of leave. And he is a young man, after all. Not very far from the horror of these battles, life is going on. And he says, so he's got his leave. I'd scarcely got home and made myself comfortable when a telegram came after me. Return immediately, further orders from the town major, Cambrai. So he's got to go back to this town. 3 hours later, I was sitting in the train. On the way to the station, I met 3 girls in light summer dresses with tennis rackets in their hands, laughing as they went. It was a brilliant farewell life gave me, and one that I often thought of when I was back in the line.
Just the sight.
3 pretty girls.
Yeah.
Having conversations like girls do. That's all going on at the same time that the war is going on. That's when we talked about Woodhouse, Jeeves and Wooster, this was all, he started writing that during World War I. Which is the more real, the war or the girls playing tennis? Which is more representative of life?
Okay. Yeah, do I have to pick?
They both are, I guess.
This is so awful. He talks about seeing the dead.
Mm-hmm.
The face half framed by the steel rim of the helmet was unmoved. So they're seeing all these dead people, and he has this guide that's supposed to take his platoon to the front. And he says, one could see that the man had been through horror to the limit of despair, and there had learnt to despise it. Nothing was left but supreme and superhuman indifference. Where you fall, there you lie. No one can help you. No one knows whether he will come back alive. They attack every day, but they can't get through. Everybody knows it is life and death. And then Jünger writes, we can fight with such fellows.
Mm-hmm.
Those people that have seen it all and then can continue on with that superhuman indifference. Ugh. But that's what it takes. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy. He has these little vignettes about what a leader has to do. I wrote here, is it better to be the leader or to be led? That's what I wrote in the margin. I said, they're under another bombardment. And at 3 p.m, the men came in from the left flank and said they could stick to it no longer as their shelters were shot to bits. It cost me all my callousness to get them back to their posts. What does that mean?
He had to get them to go there, even though they have no shelter, they have no cover. What are they going to do? Dig new ones? Under the bombardment? If you have a hole in your line, you don't have a line.
And he cost him all of his callousness. What does that mean? Did he turn a pistol on them? Did he shoot one of them?
Don't know.
What did it take to get him to go back there?
Yeah, there's lots. It's kind of photographic the way he writes it. Little pictures of things without much comment, and it's real hard for me. Page 53, after they had coffee. After breakfast, I went out to have a look round. Heavy artillery had turned a peaceful little billeting town into a scene of desolation in the course of a day or two. Whole houses had been flattened by single direct hits or blown up so that the interiors of rooms hung over the chaos like the scenes on a stage. A sickly scent of dead bodies rose from many of the ruins, for many civilians had been caught in the bombardment and buried beneath the wreckage of their homes. A little girl lay dead in a pool of blood on the threshold of one of the doorways. Just one paragraph.
Yeah.
No comment.
It's just full of them.
No comment. There's war. There's this war. Yeah. You want to know what it's like? This is what it was like.
He says right at the top of that page 13 about commenting, he says, although I made up my mind to omit all comments from this book. And then at the footnote it says, its aim, the book it is, its aim is to deal with the experience of war purely. I have attempted to deal with the psychology in other works, like War as an Inward Experience was another one of his books. And then he goes on to say that he did want to comment and make a few words about the first glimpses of the horror of war. He says how horrible it was. And he says a long period of law and order such as our generation has behind it, produces a real craving for the abnormal, a craving that literature stimulates. Among other questions that occupied us was this is before he sees the war. What does it look like when there are dead laying about? And we never for a moment dreamt in this war that the dead would be left month after month to the mercy of wind and weather, as once the bodies on the gallows were.
Yeah, I think I had that passage marked too, and I thought about that. When you have a long period of prosperity, such as they'd had, I guess, running up to the war, there's this thing that humans do. We get bored.
Mm-hmm.
There are mysteries behind that word. It's a word that we've invented to talk about something that is crazy. Boredom means things that are good become ungood, simply because you've experienced them. So that sweater that you got last year that was in style and kept you warm and was great, this year you're bored with it, you need a new one. Your car becomes no good, even though the car hasn't changed. Your life becomes intolerable to you, even though Percy talks about this, Dostoevsky talks about this. There's something weird about humans. When a dog gets bored, says Percy, it doesn't get bored. It goes to sleep. The walk with Master does not get boring for the dog. There's no day that he just looks at you and says, nah.
We've already done that.
Yeah, I guess he's speaking of himself and his the people in his age group, bored with prosperity, bored with living a shopkeeper's life in Germany. You know, we gotta do something. Some great experience. We need to do something. The urge to break stuff. Mm-hmm. It's part of the human experience. It's interesting that he puts it at the beginning of this book.
Yeah.
It makes me want to read the book that's mentioned in the footnote, War as Inward Experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. I want to read it.
Put it on my infinite pile of books to read.
Ugh, I know. I love all the stuff about leadership in here. You know, people make a lot of, these stupid business books and everything, make a bunch of lip service about leadership. You know, you see that shit all the time. And it bothers me because most of the time what's being talked about is really not that. I don't know what it is. But this guy's a leader of men. There's no question about it. And he has little 1-sentence, 2-sentence, 3-sentence blurbs spread throughout the book about what that meant, what he had to do as that leader when the stakes were high, and also stuff about his philosophy. On 58, he says, bad times. Every page on here is bad times. So picture this, bad times. And then he says, a better opportunity could not be wished for making the influence of an officer tell. Everywhere relieved and reliefs were hurrying through the shells in the darkness, some of them utterly lost and dazed with excitement and exhaustion. Everywhere voices rang out in command or in monotonous supplication from the shell holes where the wounded were left to their fate. As he rushed by, I gave information to those who had lost their way, pulled men out of shell holes, threatened to shoot any who wanted to fall out, kept shouting my name to keep my men together, and at last, as though by a miracle, I got my platoon back to Combles. Time and time again, this is his own account, but I don't think anyone's ever discredited anything that he said in these accounts here. He's the leader man. He's the glue that kept that platoon together, and his mortality rates were very, very high. But the ones that made it was through at least some part due to Jünger and his work. An officer in the front line often has to put himself technically in the wrong from considerations of the personal kind. Like as an officer, he wasn't supposed to go on particular kinds of patrols, but he would do it anyway. So as an officer in the front line, he often has to put himself technically in the wrong from considerations of a personal kind. He couldn't ask those guys to do something that he wouldn't do, even if it was against the regulations for him to go. If you got to go in, I think you want him to be your platoon leader.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, he becomes a company commander and has just entire companies just shot out from under him like horses.
Yeah, I want to read a bit on 61. There's so much of this that we could just read to you.
Yeah.
His commentary on what's happening to the people around him. So this is the third paragraph up on the bottom of 61. The terrible losses out of all proportion to the breadth of front attacked were principally due to the old Prussian obstinacy with which the tactics of the line were pursued to their logical conclusion. So we were talking about how technology had gotten ahead of the tactics.
Yeah.
And later in the book, he's countermanding some of the things that come from above, from somebody sitting at a desk 20 miles away, and changing things. One battalion after another was crowded up into the front lines, already overmanned, and in a few hours pounded to bits. Well, that's interesting. So in the old days of musket fire, you would want as many people near the line as possible, because you could concentrate your fire better, because it takes a little time to reload the thing. Well, now, if you have all of your people bunched up in a line, they're going to get bombed or gassed or otherwise killed. It was a long while before the folly of contesting worthless strips of ground was recognized. It was finally given up and the principle of a mobile defense adopted. The last development of this was the elastic distribution of the defense in zones. All right, so they changed their tactics as the war went on. And now here's what, again, breaks my heart a little bit. Thus it was that there was never again such bitterly contested engagement as those that for weeks together were fought out round shot-shell woods or undecipherable ruins. The names of the tinest Picardy hamlets are memorials of heroic battles to which the history of the world can find no parallel. There it was that the dust first drank the blood of our trained and disciplined youth. Those fine qualities which had raised the German race to greatness leapt up once more in dazzling flame, and then slowly went out in a sea of mud and blood. He's a patriot. He's a fan of his people. But there they are in the mud and the blood. How many of those hamlets held a battle greater than the Iliad?
Yeah.
Hundreds of times over. And heroes greater than Achilles and Diomedes and Hector. All of them.
Yeah, he says that the trench warfare, I don't know where this was in there, but he says it's the greatest form of warfare ever. I think he mentions the Iliad. I may be wrong about this, but on the field of battle in the Iliad, Ajax may come to your aid, or you can turn and run, but not in the trench. Your friends can't help you because either you're being shelled, or it's hand to hand with a guy that's right across from you inside the trench. You're essentially in a pipe, and you can't get out, and it's narrow, and your friends can't help. It's you are contacting that foe, and there's nowhere to go. It's like the Thunderdome. It's dystopian. It's like you chain two guys together, and somebody has to die, and nobody can help them. That's what it's like. And he didn't love it for that, but he said I think he said it was the purest form of warfare.
Yeah, I think that's what the quote was.
I'd never really thought about it that way. He leads an offensive. Where I think it's an entire company finally gets to English lines and essentially clears several hundred yards of trench and just routs a bunch of enemy soldiers and ends up taking a group of like 20 men, ultimately end up taking well over 100 prisoners. And I was reading that, I thought the tactics that they used with the use of the bombs, the hand grenades, and the way they approached that was a lot like Winter's storming the artillery emplacement in France with hand grenades. That maneuver in Band of Brothers Winters came up with in the field is still taught and studied today. And Jünger's breach of those trenches, I think when he got the Iron Cross, was very, very similar. Just amazing. He's got a pistol and a walking stick, because, we're good people, and a coat with a bunch of pockets full of hand grenades. He and these men just rout like almost an entire regiment of English. It's amazing. And then when he gets there, he sees all the supplies that the English have, all the tins of jam and the bread and food and clothing and all this stuff, this material that they left behind. And they've been on iron rations now for months and months and months. He doesn't say it outright, but the resentment comes off the page.
Yeah, there's a bit in, I found it, 113 generals criticizing a less successful attack. The general staff officer received me in his office and tried in vain to impress upon me that I owed the loss of my men to an ill-considered and over-hasty advance. I thought, you can tell me a lot sitting here 20 kilometers behind the line. And I gave him to understand that in the enemy's front line I had neither a green table nor the pack of cards upon it. That's kind of funny,
Yep.
I wonder if he used such polite language. I know a few German curse words. I wonder if he ever says them. See, sometimes he's delicate in this. Like, sometimes the soldiers would. Well, there were some women around, and he'll say, Venus had her problems too. He'll never say, he's very, very delicate about that.
He's several lines about Venus, and one of them he said that Mars had deprived Venus of her rewards. A bunch of the guys that he was going to go to town with had gotten killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, there's a bit on 120 which brought up some Tolkien memories for me. And I can't remember. Did Tolkien actually... Was he on the other side of these trenches? But there's a scene. It's reasonably well done in the movie, but it's towards the end of Lord of the Rings when they're making their way into Mordor, and they're coming over this place called Dagorland, which means battle plain. There are faces in the water, and Frodo nearly drowns because he gets sucked down by the faces of the dead from this long ago battle. Yeah, Tolkien was at the Battle of the Somme, so he was on the other side. Maybe they saw each other. But there are these puddles. The shell holes are filled with water. This is on page 120. The chase through the morass was frantically exhausting, and when completely pumped, we had to stop a while and give the English a good target, but a few HE soon restored us to our first rigor. All the same, they had the advantage of concealing us from the enemy in their smoke. The worst feature of this run was knowing that a wound would drown one for certainty in a mud hole. A suffusion of blood on the surface of the shell hole here and there showed that many a man had vanished thus. Okay, so that story in Tolkien, in Lord of the Rings, where you have these swampland where there are dead down in the water that will summon you down into the water, this is true life. This is what these battle plains were like. The holes will be filled with water. It's wet. It's a damp region. You get wounded and you drown in the hole and you're buried in the mud. They're probably still out there. So the fantastic in the fiction is a representation of what the reality was. It ain't like it is in the movies.
No. So fucking stupid.
See, that's still my impression. That's why I wish he would have given that conversation he had with that gentleman about the causes of war.
Right.
Why were they fighting? What's the point?
I agree. But if I'm ever put in that sort of a situation, and I hope that I never am, and I'm glad that I haven't been, I would like to have his attitude about it.
Explain a little more.
He doesn't hate his enemy, so he's not consumed by hate. He sees humanity all around him. He has kind words and kind descriptions of seeing enemy soldiers die. He understands why they are there, and then he sees the good in it. He has good times with his comrades when he can, and then he faces his work in a workmanlike manner, and he doesn't grumble or gripe and chafe under it. If your number comes up and you get drafted and you're in the thing, I think it's about the healthiest way to approach it.
I think so. I think you better do the best you can. You better be the best you can be. The incredibly puzzling question is why humans continually make war.
Sure. But that isn't the question of this book.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Granted that there are wars and that you might be in one, how should you react? Well, Junger's not a bad way to react.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the green table and the playing cards on them, the pack of cards on it. He gets an assignment. He goes down to the company headquarters to get his assignment, and he says, so his company, not his company headquarters, it was a battalion headquarters. And his company was attached to another battalion for a little bit, which is not good. He says, a company detached from its own unit is not likely to be pampered under alien command. As I had only the haziest notion of the whereabouts of Dragon Alley, that's where they had been assigned to attack, I asked as I was going for a map. Unfortunately, not a single one could be spared. I made a silent comment and went on. A silent comment?
I was thinking of you, actually, when I read that. How many silent comments have you made?
Most of them. And then on the next page there on 127, he's got this company of men rallied up at the rally point, and they're going to embark on this raid when the clock strikes 7 o'clock sharp. So they're just standing there, He says, there's a lonely, sinking feeling in the stomach as one speaks to the section leaders, tries to make jokes, and keeps running to and fro as if for an inspection by the divisional commander. In short, one tries to be as occupied as possible in order to escape the thoughts that drill into the brain. And everybody's going to get shot at. Everybody's going into danger. But him being responsible, running around and trying to get everybody ready, reassure people, ease the tension when you can.
Yeah.
Oh, that responsibility is just crushing.
There's a bit of this in the Aeneid where Aeneas, pious Aeneas, says encouraging things to his men. Oh, we've come through worse than this. Someday it will be a joy even to look back at this. Famous line. And then Virgil goes on and says, Aeneas said this, but in his own great heart he had misgivings and fear. He didn't think they were going to live through it.
Yep.
But he can't say that to his men. It's his job to say, that he believes he's going to survive. I'll give you a non-classical example. There's the beginning of the very, very fine science fiction TV series Battlestar Galactica, where Commander Adama, they don't have any place to go. All their planets have been blown up by the evil Cylons.
That's Lorne Greene, right?
No, in the original it was Lorne Greene, and in the later one it was, what's his name? Edward James Olmos.
Oh.
That series is really good. So the plan is they're going to go to Earth, but he doesn't think there's an Earth. And there's a scene, like, what is he going to say? What is he going to say? He's a skeptic on the whole Earth thing, and he gets up and he tells all the people who have just had their whole homes destroyed, and he says, we're going to Earth. I know where it is. Follow me. He doesn't know where it is. He has no idea.
Yeah. Was that the wrong thing to do?
What else are you going to do? I suppose it's a noble lie.
Vain hope.
Yeah, vain hope. Do officers have to tell noble lies?
Mm-hmm. Probably ought to.
Do the soldiers not know that they're noble lies?
Some of them probably do. Here's another gruesome story. Again, we could just read chunks out of this all day.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so. Another gruesome story. Our gunner, the volunteer Motulo, I don't know how to pronounce these names, was killed by a shot through the head. Though his brain fell over his face to his chin, his mind was still clear when we took him to the nearest dugout. That's all he says about it, and they just move on. By degrees, things calmed down, and the English, too, were busy making a block. We sat down on the pillbox and lunched off the English provisions and discussed the situation. Just goes on. Again, he's trying to not make comment. I got a section here, I don't even know what it says. I said read aloud on the podcast.
What page?
131 starts. Even modern battle has its great moments. One hears it said very often and very mistakenly that the infantry battle had degenerated to uninteresting butchery. On the contrary, today more than ever, it is the individual that counts. Everyone knows that, who has seen them in their own realm, these princes of the trenches, with their hard, set faces, brave to madness, tough and agile to leap forward or back, with keen, bloodthirsty nerves, whom no dispatch ever mentions. Trench warfare is the bloodiest, wildest, and most brutal of all warfare, yet it too has had its men whom the call of the hour has raised up, unknown, foolhardy fighters. Of all the nerve-wracking moments of the war, none is so formidable as the meeting of two storm-troop leaders between the narrow walls of the trench. There is no retreat and no mercy then. Blood sounds in the shrill cry that is wrung like a nightmare from the breast.
Yeah. So there's this scene, not having done this myself, I'm going to go back to literature. There's a scene in the Iliad where the Trojans have gotten to the ships. And everybody's wounded. All the best Achaeans are wounded. But Ajax, big Ajax, is standing on the boat with his big spear, defending everybody, single-handedly, defending the ships. And what you have to think is, and I've got a picture open on my desktop here of the 1st Battalion Lancashire Fusiliers in a trench. And I'm looking at a bunch of Ajaxes, or a whole bunch of them are Ajaxes. They are every bit the epic hero, the heroic. Gosh, it looks like there's a skeleton in the wall of that trench.
It's probably true.
Probably is. But, if you've read these stories, you've seen these movies, any sort of movie that has a hero that does heroic things, well, there were 1.2 million of them in the Battle of the Somme. Or at least 1.2 dead. Who knows how many of them were heroes. I started teaching the Iliad. The motive for me teaching it was 9/11. I had some choice on the books to read, and I thought, well, we just had a huge attack carried out in a major city, and there's going to be war. Maybe we ought to read this.
Mm-hmm. It's a good idea.
For a while, the students really responded to it, not because you necessarily care what happened or did not happen 3,000 years ago on the windswept plains of Troy, but because it happens over and over and over again. Reading that or reading this book, you can understand something of human nature in these situations that we keep getting into.
I think that's important. I think that you've heard the deal. Jünger here alludes to it when he talks about how the sort of the boredom leads to this novelty seeking, which could lead to war, and how literature fuels that. You've heard the thing, strong men make good times make weak men make bad times make strong men. But throughout all of that, whatever that cycle is, we've got the problem of human nature. We get ourselves into these messes. They always happen. And I wish people would remember that they always happen. There's no utopian plan. I'm editorializing now. Mm-hmm. There's no utopian plan. There's not a secret political sauce or anything that's going to keep this stuff from happening, because we've had our entire human history to figure out how to keep it from happening, yet it continues. So we need to know what it's like, and we need to know what we're getting into, and we need to not ever feel like or believe that we're past it, or we've conquered it, or we're better than that now, or that we're out of the woods or whatever, because war's got its skeleton grip around our throat every day.
There's a temptation to think that we're the good ones. Whichever group you're in, we're the good ones. We'll do it right. We'll bend the arc of history. Everybody has always thought that.
Yep.
For however many thousands of years humans have existed. We have 6,000 years of written history, roughly. Evidence of like 10,000 years ago, I guess. When did they ever figure it out? They didn't. How arrogant must you be to think that your generation is going to figure it out, and that there will no more be conflict, there will no more be people doing violence to other people. We're going to solve it. Good luck to you. I hope you're right. But past performance, future results.
Yep.
I hope you're right. But you probably ought to know something about it. So you can pick up Jünger's book. There was a bit of poetry on 135. I might look it up in German one of these days. I could probably find the German edition online. It was a pleasure, too, to recall those evenings when we sat together around the table and talked, hot-headed, of the fresh frolic in front of us, the war of movement. Though our last coins went in wine, what need had we of money beyond the enemy's lines, or indeed in a better beyond? And then here's the poem. Who knows but that the world to ruin may be hurled? But if it lasts today, today's enough. That's good. It's kind of a motto. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but here's today.
One of the things that makes me cry all the time is normal people that do normal things and nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 138, so just a few pages before, he's talking about hanging out with his brothers of war around the stove and drinking their wine, and that today is enough. Just a couple pages later, he says, a young lad, a milksop, who a few days before had been jeered at by his companions because during the training he had burst into tears over the weight of a box of ammunition, was now loyally hulking one along on our painful way after retrieving it from the scene of our disaster. When I saw that, I was finished. I threw myself on the ground and broke into convulsive sobs while the men stood gloomily round me. So he's been seeing these guys fight and do stereotypically heroic things, going over the top, hand to hand, so on. And when he sees this young guy just lugging this box of ammunition under fire in danger when only a day or two before he couldn't do it, that's it for Jünger. And he falls down in the bottom of the trench, leader of men, already won the Iron Cross, which is like getting the Medal of Honor. And it broke him like a glass rod.
I'm getting mad at myself. So can I argue with myself for a minute?
Sure.
All right.
I'd rather you argued with you than me. With you.
So this is directed at me because I have watched a bunch of these superhero movies that everybody watches now. I'm kind of tired of them, but I am coming to think what a bunch of absolute crap they are. So we put people in capes and tights and give them superpowers and then try to generate narrative drama through Infinity Wars or something. And it's all garbage. You want all of that? Read the history books and read actual people who did actual things, not made up people in a CGI hell of Marvel entertainment. I'm mad at myself for having wasted the time of watching them.
It's okay. No, it's
could have been reading.
I can't believe you did that.
What a putz I am. Comic book movies.
In this instance, and he doesn't name this guy. He probably didn't know his name. He was a new recruit, and in training just a few days earlier, he couldn't. He was crying, probably because he didn't think he could drag this ammo box. That's at the end of a terrible botched raid. One in which the guides that they chose that they had been given to lead them to the debarkation point, got them lost. Jünger and his company. At the bottom he says, from then on, I always chose the guides myself and with the greatest care. The lessons of the war are thorough but costly. Man, so he picks himself out of the trench, crying, lights a cigar. It's literally what he does. He says here, and leaned back and talked to Schmidt and thought about what had happened. It does a little autopsy on a post-action report, right? Figures out what went wrong, and he decides now he's clear-headed, and he's able to figure it out and become a better leader over and over again. He loved his enemy. He sees a machine gun nest that had been firing on them, and his men eventually take this machine gun nest, and he goes up to the machine gun that was half concealed beneath a huge heap of empty drums. It was still nearly red hot and smoking. The corpse of an athlete lay in front of it.
An athlete? One who competes?
Yeah, his enemy. In the Aegon here.
Oh, gosh.
Later on, he talks about another guy dying. He says, it was a sight that had nothing sad or painful in it. I was touched by nothing but a clear feeling of affection for the dying man.
So 142.
It's amazing character, this man.
Yeah, well, an amazing event this thing was. And, to go back to our earlier talk about wars, what's the subtitle of the Great War?
Oh, it's the war to end all wars.
The war to end all wars. Yeah, you might recall General Butler said that in the War is a Racket thing. And ruefully says it, he was in it. And the war to end all wars, and I wish it had, but it hasn't. So he's talking about heroism. And therewith, let's see, the turmoil of our feelings was called forth by rage, alcohol, and the thirst for blood as we stepped out heavily and yet irresistibly for the enemy's lines. And therewith beat the pulse of heroism, the godlike and the bestial inextricably mingled. This is the Achaeans marching at the Trojans. And that's what heroism is. They're godlike and yet they're bestial. Mm-hmm. I have that one starred.
Yeah, this is the Iliad in a lot of ways, I think. They were there 10 years. These guys were here 4. They were pinned down on the beaches. He's pinned down in a ditch, but very similar. But he says, you are not a fighter only, but a soldier. That's the difference between Jünger, I'm sure there are a lot, and Achilles. Achilles is a fighter. He's not a soldier.
Right.
I'm not sure I can say what the difference is. It's like porn. I know it when I see it. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. The fighter would be there for the personal glory or maybe even bloodlust or maybe even just plain old psychopathy. I don't know. But the soldier fits into a larger picture and has roles and a duty and responsibilities that somebody like Achilles didn't have, I think, that the fighter doesn't have.
When I suggested who might have written this, that's why I suggested Diomedes rather than Achilles. Because Diomedes never seems to question the war. He even yells at Agamemnon when Agamemnon wants to turn tail and run. He's like, we're here, we have a job to do. We're going to do it. Where Achilles it's about his personal honor.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it is here. For Jünger, his personal honor is tied into his ability to lead his men. It's not personal, simply make Ernst Jünger be the hero. I'm certain that Achilles doesn't care. I'm pretty sure he didn't care about Patroclus, but that's my own interpretation of the Iliad. Yeah, so it's quite different from Achilles, but not necessarily from Diomedes. He got hit 14 times. He counts it on page 174.
Yep.
14 times. 6 times by rifle bullets, once by a shrapnel bullet, once by a shell splinter, 3 times by bomb splinters, and twice by splinters of rifle bullets. Counting the ins and outs, this made precisely... I'm sorry, it's kind of funny. This made precisely 20 punctures.
If you've read All's Quiet on the Western Front, I say this before, can you actually give spoilers if the book's 100 years old?
You could, but it's their own fault. So if you haven't read All's Quiet on the Western Front and you think you're going to, spoiler alert.
Yeah. At the end of the book, I'm going to get some of these names wrong. Paul is carrying Cat on his back. Cat's been wounded. Kaczynski is his name, I think. Carrying him on his back, and he carries him back to the, I don't know, field hospital or some such, only to find out that he had been killed by a shrapnel. It pierced his skull so he carries this dead man back, but he doesn't know it. And he's talking to him, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, I got you, and he gets back and the guy's dead. Well, that book was written in 1930. This was written in 1920. They're both German language books. Jünger gets, he gets shot up, stabbed up, messed up, got 14 holes in him, like you just said, Karl. In the last chapter, which is called My Last Storm, he gets shot, and then he decides that his only choice was being taken or getting shot again. I mean, it's a Audie Murphy style scene where he's shooting people with pistols and working his way back towards the rear because he's wounded. A fellow picked him up, Lance Corporal Hingstmann. I'll take you on my back, sir. Either we'll get through, or at worst, we'll lie where we fall. Unfortunately, we did not get through. Too many rifles aimed at us at almost point-blank range. He took me on his back with my arms around his neck. But before we had gone very far, there was a metallic report, and Hinksman sank softly beneath me to the ground. I released myself from his arms that were still clasped under my knees and found that a bullet had passed through helmet and temples. The brave man was a schoolmaster's son from Letter near Hanover. That's a lot like the scene.
Yeah. Boy, it's a hard book to read. We read a lot of hard books. We read them, so why do we read them?
I don't know. We may not make it, but we'll lie where we fall.
Yeah.
And picked him up.
Yeah, well, hey, here's another example, another fictional example. You mentioned All's Quiet on the Western Front. I always return to Lord of the Rings. The end, what does Sam do for Frodo? Picks him up. Carries him. Written by a World War I veteran.
Yeah.
If you want the real thing, read the real stories. They're out there. We fictionalize them. I think we make them, I don't know. Maybe it's the only way people can take them is in fiction.
Yeah, this one's tough.
Maybe all you can do is deal with Iron Man heroically beating what's-his-name at the end of Infinity Wars. Because it's too much for you to read Jünger's book. Maybe we need it tame. But if we get it tame, it's diluted, I think.
Yeah, what a man. Hardened as scarcely another generation ever was in fire and flame. We could go into life as though from the anvil, into friendship, love, politics, professions, and into all that destiny had in store. It is not every generation that is so favored.
Yeah, those are some hard words. I'm not sure it worked out that way. You have the Weimar Republic and then, sinking into another war and bad times ahead. He's hopeful in this. The reason we read the 1929 translation, which Mystery Grove put out, is because he kept returning to this book, and he'd do other editions of it. And so if you get whoever publishes, whatever big publishing house publishes it now, it's a much later revision where Jünger has taken a bunch of this stuff out, which is his right to do, and I might want to look at those and see what he changed. But I wanted to get the early Jünger, the guy much closer to the war, not the 100-year-old guy returning back, because he did live to be 103, and revising it. I wanted the hot take, which is kind of what this is, which is why that 1929 edition is so interesting to me. The first edition's 1920. It's 2 years.
Yep.
It's 2 years. And it's got all this hopeful young man stuff in it. You know, we who went through the war will be better. What a great opportunity it was. It's good to hear that people think that. I don't know if he thought that in 1945.
Yeah. Can you imagine being born in 1895, doing that, all he did here? He ended up being a German officer during, he wasn't a frontline guy or didn't even have, I don't think, combat command in World War II. He was kind of a staffer in Paris during the occupation there. Ended up seeing partitioning of Berlin, saw that come back together, all those things. Born in 1895 and died in 1998. All the things that guy saw.
Would have liked to have lunch with him.
Yeah. He got married in 1925. His first wife died in 1960, so he was married to her for 35 years, and then got married in 1962 and was married to her to the day he died. He was married twice for longer than almost anybody is.
If you're worried about such things, he was an anti-Nazi. Some connection with the Stauffenberg plot. Yep.
I have heard, I don't know, it seems like I heard that they had identified him to maybe be head of state after, if the assassination attempt against Hitler had worked.
I hadn't heard that. That would have been interesting.
I think
history.
He had been approached for that, and then he had said no. Of course, the assassination attempt did not work.
Yeah. He was an atheist for 103 years.
Yeah, I like this.
But not all of his years. So he became a Catholic before he died, which is amazing. That's good timing, right?
That's the way to do it.
You save your baptism for like the very end. So good for him. I hope it worked out for him. He was an entomologist. Such an interesting guy. I'm looking at all the decorations and awards. I'm on the Wikipedia page right now. It makes me want to read more of his stuff.
Yeah. But he was an entomologist, and he mentions collecting beetles at one point in the book. He was kind of they would rotate in and out of the front lines, and he was out of the front lines for a time and wandering some fields collecting beetles.
Well, and the things that he does while he's out there, so he has this ideal of what a gentleman ought to be. He's getting shelled. He's reading Tristram Shandy.
Yeah.
Which is a very strange English book. I haven't read it. I tried to read it. It's hard. Maybe someday. It's supposed to be really good.
That means we have to put it on our infinity list.
Put it on our affinity list. He says in the middle of 174, I found many an example among the French civilian population of that internationality of the heart that every decent man and educated soldier ought to uphold. Some cosmopolitan ideals, even while he's fighting for his nation, in the blood and the dirt.
The mud, the blood, and the beer.
Yeah.
What do you say? Got a good beat, easy to dance to? 2 thumbs up? What?
If you're looking for a horrifying, really good book, I can't speak from experience. The dear listeners can help us. What other accounts of warfare are so immediate and profound as this? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, Jünger, he's kind of at some risk of being unpersoned.
Well, aren't we all?
Yeah, probably. Because of some of these attitudes about war. And I think if you read this, you'll see he's not a pro-war person, but I think he is a generous soul who can see good in all things. And I think we'd all be probably a little better off if we were a little more like Uncle Ernst, maybe. At least so far as I know him. Maybe he had some deep, dark secrets I'm not aware of that make him too much, a bridge too far. I don't know. I don't want to talk about this book anymore.
It's hard.
It's real hard.
I read it on the beach. Okay, so I wrote it on the beach.
Weirdo.
Well, I was doing some sun worshipping in the beach that I can get to. My kids are, gosh, they're doing things to me. This is a beach in Indiana that I'm not going to tell you where it is because it's our favorite beach. So good luck. You're not going to find it. But obviously it's on Lake Michigan. Oh, no, I've told you too much. Cut that part out. But the dune has collapsed and there's this flat area of sand. It's like an enormous beach. And so I was sitting by the water with my toes in the water, reading Jünger in the sunlight because that's when you should read him. Don't read it at nighttime in the dark. Read it in the sunshine, preferably with a beverage. And my kids are digging World War I trenches. They dug it like 5 foot deep, and so they'd have two of them in the trench, and then the littlest one would come running at them, throwing sand at them like bullets and trying to charge the trench, and then they would kill him, and, figuratively, and then they'd do it again. That was hard.
Grace is like, let's see if we can make Dad cry.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. I think it's a good one. That was actually my second time through it, and I don't think I ever want to read it again, but you ought to. Meanwhile, go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and get on the mailing list, please. Come on. I ask you every week, and you still haven't done it, so please do that. Because we're going to be opening enrollment again here pretty soon. We only do it 6 times a year. We're going to have a limited number of slots. We just about got overran last time, and we're going to have to put a little cap on it. If we sign up too many people, we can't do a good job. We get overwhelmed. We run out of books. Nobody buys more Plato than us. And sometimes we run out of books if we're not careful. So we'll limit enrollment on this next trip. So go sign up for that. Karl, what are we going to read next week? Are we going to read the Wendell Berry book?
I have to get it. I'll go order it right now.
Brett McKay, on my birthday last year, gave me this book. Wendell Berry's book, Jayber Crow, Jayber.
All right. I'm going to get it right now.
And he says, you need to read this book. This book's for you. And I said, well, thank you. Thanks for the gift. He's like, no, you don't understand. Wendell Berry wrote this book for you. I'm sure of it. It's been on my infinity stack, and I just decided that I was going to read it no matter what, even if it killed me. I love it so much. I love it so much.
All right. It says I can have it tomorrow.
You need to get it tomorrow.
Here I go.
I love it so much. Since he gave me that book, Wendell Berry kept jumping up in my face. Other people would say, you heard of Wendell Berry. He sounds like you should read some Wendell Berry. Or I would, just see his name in periodicals. And The Great Magnet was telling me I needed to read it. So,
The Great Magnet?
The Great Magnet.
What is The Great Magnet?
That thing that causes all the things to happen.
The unmoved magnet?
The unmoved magnet. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
So we'll do Wendell Berry. We have some other things we're thinking about reading.
Yeah, let's name one.
I want to return to Tolkien a little bit. At some point in the future, he wrote a story and an essay on mythopoiesis, on making myth, what he's after when he's writing these fairy stories. Mm-hmm. And there's a little story called Leaf by Niggle, which is attached to it, so I'm going to drag Scott into that one. It's not 1,100 pages.
Okay, you want to do that one after Wendell Berry?
Might be a nice postprandial.
Yeah, let's do that.
We need some lighter stuff.
Yeah, we should.
This is hard. I think my soul is better off having read these last few things, but it's a little bit sadder.
Yeah, the McIntyre book was hard on me. I think the Berry book is going to fit in there with it nicely. I think you'll be happy to see it. Yeah, there's another Online Great Books podcast. Remember, you need to go get Jayber Crow by Wendell Berry, Berry. And then we'll go read the week after that, which is 2 weeks from today. We'll be covering Leaf by Niggle by Tolkien. Sounds good. Little palate cleanser.
Mm-hmm. Mostly the essay is connected to the story, so that edition I sent you is the one to get.
Okay, I ordered that. It's on the way. All right. And then we'll dig into some other dark shit, I don't know, like the Killer Angels or some other miserable something.
We are never going to read The Road.
No, okay.
Nope.
I don't care.
I forbid it.
Okay. I've never read any Cormac McCarthy. I don't know that I need... That's Cormac McCarthy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sully loves his book, Blood Meridian. The Road's really good as a literary production, but too hard. Much too hard.
Good enough. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please go to Spotify and hit the little share button and then share it on either Facebook or Instagram or wherever it is that you hang out in not the real world. And then, when you're talking to one of your friends or something, tell them to listen to our show. I think they'll like it. We're trying to do a good job. And if you're proud enough of us, maybe you can tell somebody you care about us. That would be a big help to us. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk to you next Thursday.
Yes, sir.